皆さんこんにちは。それではこれからベジタリアン対応、ヴィーガン対応無料講座 in 北九州第4回8月24日配信のオンデマンド講座をお送りいたします。タイトルは日本でベジタリアンとして生きる際の課題。講師はドクタースティーブ・ケルシーさんです。スティーブさんにはなぜベジタリアンになったのか、日本とイギリスをベジタリアンとして行き来する中でのご経験、ベジタリアンとしての考え、思いを語っていただきたいと思います。
Hello, I'm Steve Kelsey. I'm British. I lived in Japan from 1989 to just before 1999, so for nearly 10 years. I came to Japan to study Japanese Budo, Japanese martial arts, and I was going to stay for 1 or 2 years, and I stayed nearly 10 years because I met a girl who became my wife and still my wife. In work, I am a consultant and I help organizations grow and change. And I'm also, from last year, a psychologist. So I became I graduated with my PhD last year. So I'm now Dr. Steve. And I'm still practicing martial arts.
いつベジタリアンになったのですか？
I became a vegetarian when I was 18 years old. I had just started university in Kent, in Canterbury, and it was the first time I've really been away from home for any long period. And until then, I'd always been a meat eater. I was never a big fish eater, but I did eat fish, but I did eat meat probably nearly every day. So I went to university, which was obviously a big change. And as you do as a student, I was talking to some friends, and one of them was a vegetarian. And probably the first time I'd really met somebody who said they were a vegetarian. And they talked to me about being a vegetarian, and that was interesting. And they asked me, why did I eat meat? And I said, well, because I like it. And that was not really a very satisfactory answer, I thought. I'd never thought about it. I like meat, I ate meat. So I thought about it, and they said, well, why don't you try for a month or two to be a vegetarian? So I did try. And I'm still trying. So how many years is that? 36 years later? I'm still trying to be a vegetarian.
その時の家族の反応はどうでしたか？
This is the mid 1980s, and there's no internet, of course. There's none of that, and a vegetarianism was a very unusual thing. And it was such when I told my parents and I told my mother. I telephone home now and again to say I'm okay, and I said, "Oh, I've become a vegetarian." She was very surprised and she was very worried. So much so that she went to the local doctors to ask some advice about me. And maybe that sounds strange, but back in the 1980s, you couldn't ask Google, and you couldn't, so going to the doctor was seen as somebody in the local area who would be one of the most knowledgeable people about health. And she went to the doctors. I don't know why she managed to get an appointment, but she got an appointment to see the doctor to talk about me being a vegetarian. And he was very concerned. And he said, your son has to stop being a vegetarian straight away. Otherwise, he'll be very, very sick. My mother told me that, and I was like, don't be silly. But she was very worried, very worried. I think she thought I would be dead within a few days.
なぜベジタリアンになったのですか？
There are several reasons. Obviously, the initial conversation I had with the person who encouraged me. I think when I started to become a vegetarian, it made me think a lot more about what I was eating and why I was eating things. And I realized that although I thought I liked meat, the reason I was eating it was not because of my like, it was because of the culture I was in, the society. My parents had always given me meat. My school had given me meat. Every time I turned on the TV, and if I watched a TV commercial, there was always a meat advert for sausages, for bacon, for chicken, for Kentucky Fried Chicken, you know, always a meat advert. So I began to realize that it hadn't really been my choice to eat meat. So that was one. And as I started to eat meat and read about it and learn about it, I realized that the meat industry and the fishing industry are not that great in regards to how they treat nature, how they treat animals. I think it's becoming even more obvious, but back then it was a little obvious that the meat industry is an industry and the welfare of humans and the welfare of animals is not their number one priority. The number one priority is to make money. And therefore the encouragement of me to eat meat was, and the reason I was doing it was probably as a product of industry, the society, capitalism in this case, encouraging me to eat meat. So that was another reason. Health-wise, it's never been a massive concern for me. I probably don't always eat the completely healthy diet. I still eat chocolate and I drink alcohol, and but I do think a good vegetarian or vegan diet is better for you healthy. Certainly, I don't think, I mean, I've survived more than 2 weeks of being a vegetarian, so it hasn't killed me. Has it made me healthier? It's impossible to know, because how can I compare myself with what I would have been, because there's no data. So, you know, I could die tomorrow and it could be because of anything. So health, although I think it's important, it was not a central concern for me. And the last thing, I guess, to say, maybe it's the first thing, it made me be very conscious of how I live. And I talk about this in terms of conscious living. And many of us are not conscious about the impact our life has on the world around us. And me, as much as anybody, eating food I liked and not even thinking about the whole food system, the industry, the effect on nature, it was me being ignorant, but maybe unconscious. So eating, one of the best decisions I made was to become a vegetarian, because it made me think much deeper about who I am and what I should be doing.
あなたはどんなベジタリアンですか？
It's a question that I generally never ask myself, and probably for the first, I don't know how many years, it was not a question I even thought about. And the first time I became conscious of that question was when I began to fly on flights to Japan to England, or England to Japan. And they would often give you a choice of what kind of food you want. And over the last 10, 20 years, before they might say meat, fish, vegetarian. And over the years, they've started to give you much more detailed descriptions of the kind of vegetarian you are. However, even now, even though I've flown literally hundreds of times, and even now, and you can do it all online now, so I can book a flight and I can book my dinner, my meal. it asks me what type of vegetarian. I have to look at them and sometimes Google them because I go, I'm this, I'm this, I'm like, I don't know. I understand the difference between vegetarian and vegan, but after that, I'm like, I really don't know. And I really don't care. As long as it doesn't have meat or fish in it, then I'm kind of okay. Obviously, if I was a vegan, I would be more careful. But it's an interesting question because I think it's a very modern question. And 20 years ago, nobody really asked you. You might meet someone who's a vegan, but even vegetarians, if they've been a vegetarian for some, they generally don't ask that question.
ベジタリアンになった時の食事はどうでしたか？
My first year, I was in university accommodation, in university halls, we called it. So it's like you have a private room, but you're in lots of rooms. And I'm living on campus, and they have restaurants, cafeterias for breakfast, lunch, dinner, you know. And fortunately, the university provided vegetarian meals all the time. And you've got to remember, most breakfasts are vegetarian. In the UK, we have like an English breakfast, bacon, sausage, eggs. But most people, I think, don't eat that every day because it would be too much food. So you eat maybe some toast and jam or some cereal. Yeah. So breakfast is usually okay anyway. Lunch and dinner I was eating at university, and having cheese sandwich, and for dinner having a vegetarian meal that they made. The difficulty happened when I left that accommodation in my second year and had lived in a house with other people, a shared house, so 4 or 5 other people in a house, where I would have to cook my own food. I could go to the university and eat still. I could go there, or I could go to a restaurant, but you had to cook at home, because of money, etc. And that was really hard because I didn't really know what vegetarian food I could cook. I knew cheese sandwiches, I knew baked potato. I'd never cooked really, so maybe I could cook pasta with some basic sauce. So that was really quite hard because I didn't know how to cook. I didn't know what to cook, like what kind of meals is good for vegetarians. And the supermarkets did not supply specific vegetarian food. So they supplied vegetables, of course. They provided pulses, beans and nuts and things, but they didn't provide, and maybe I don't think they even had pizzas back then at the supermarkets. Maybe they did, but it's hard to remember if I could have a simple pizza. So you had to make a lot of stuff from scratch. So it was terrible to begin with. I ate some very bad home cooked food when I was a vegetarian, and it was hard for my parents when I came home. My mother didn't know what to cook me.
外食はどうしていましたか？
When I was a student, it was hard because I was poor. But there's 3 types of restaurant that back then were good for vegetarians. There was no 100% vegetarian restaurants. And they were Indian restaurants, and probably in UK has lots of Indian restaurants, and I've visited India as well. India has a good sort of history of vegetarianism, and even though they're in the UK, they still serve a lot of vegetarian curry. So that's always good, but it's expensive when you're a student. Italian food is also pretty good for vegetarians because pasta can be quite simple. It can be with vegetables and tomatoes. It doesn't have to have meat. And pizzas, of course, can be without meat. So Italians are probably, my first or second favorite food because you can always get good vegetarian food in an Italian restaurant. And that's the difference. You can get in the 1980s, you could get vegetarian food in some other restaurants, but it was usually bad. Good vegetarian food in Italian, because they don't call it Italian, it's not vegetarian, it's just pasta with tomatoes or pasta with olives. It's not called vegetarian pasta because it just doesn't have meat or fish. And then Mexican, we had a few Mexican restaurants in the 80s in the UK, and Mexican food, at least my experience, usually has some good vegetarian food as well. You know, the beans and avocado and tomatoes and chilies, and then some sort of corn with tortilla or whatever. So as a vegetarian, actually, not just as a student, even after that, even today, if I go for a meal, unless I find a specific vegetarian restaurant, I often aim for Italian, Mexican, or Indian, because even in Japan, they always have vegetarian food.
今、世界を股にかけて仕事をされていますが、どこの国がベジタリアンとして食事がしやすいと感じましたか？日本はどうですか？
Well, obviously England's easy because I live here and I speak the language. India was very easy. Even though they don't always speak English, India is, in fact, I was there for a few weeks, and this is 15 years ago, and I was putting on weight because I was eating too much good food, too much good vegetarian food. I travel to Sweden a lot. Sweden's not bad, but because Sweden has, I don't know for how long, has a lot of vegetarians. So even the beef burger restaurants, even like not McDonald's, but their equivalent, they will have, there's one beef burger chain, and 50% of the beef burgers are vegetarian. I mean, it's not just one type of, they have cheese one and bean one and blah, 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 blah. So there's even on fast food, they have vegetarian. So Sweden's pretty good. France, which I have visited a lot, is bad. And it's not really, I mean, maybe the big cities, but it's not always so easy in a typical French restaurant to get vegetarian. And I was there just over a year and a half ago in a very famous restaurant, and a very famous fish restaurant, and they knew I was coming, and they went and bought me some you know, very cheap vegetarian thing that they got from somewhere. It was dreadful. I mean, everybody else was eating, you know, $50, $100 meals. I probably had like a $5 meal in this very expensive restaurant, very famous restaurant. So France is not so good, unfortunately. Italy obviously has Italian food. I've been to China actually, and when I was looked after in China, they actually took me to some very good vegetarian restaurants. I was surprised because usually it can be quite hard for me, I find, because there's lots of Chinese restaurants in the UK, and they generally aren't. Stir-fried vegetable noodles seems to be the main dish, and I'm like, ugh. But I've had some very, very good vegetarian food in China. But it was I was with some people who looked after me and took me to special restaurants. Japan. Japan was and still is pretty hard. And it's not just because of language, although obviously that plays a part. I can be with Japanese people. I've been with Japanese people. So even if my language isn't great, it's difficult. And it's difficult because they don't do this deliberately, but they often seem to hide meat and fish in food that you wouldn't expect. I like Japanese noodles and Japanese soba and udon, but I can only eat it if it's made with non-fish dashi, like kombu or whatever the mushroom one is. So it has to be specially made or a special restaurant. So, and I would go to some restaurants and I would get tofu, you know, izakaya. tofu, whatever it's called, marble tofu, just cold tofu, and they would put katsuboshi on top. I'm like, no, stop. So it's hard because sometimes you don't know. They put it in the stock, in the soup, or the consciousness towards being careful with food in terms of being vegetarian is not very common. So it's a bit hard. It can be very hard. I have gone hungry. I've been in Japan and I've gone out with people and I've basically not been able to eat. So I just drink beer. When you're a vegetarian, sometimes you have to go hungry. I think any vegetarian will know that. As a vegetarian, sometimes at some places you don't eat, and that's not fun. And that's not just uncomfortable, as in, you know, you're hungry. Going without meal for one meal is not a big challenge. It's also could be embarrassing because you embarrass your host.
初めて日本に来た時、日本での食事はどうでしたか？外食するところは多かったですか？
My very first experience of food in Japan, I'd literally arrived at Narita and was taken to Kizurazu where I was going to work. The people took me and they said, you must be hungry, which I wasn't. And they took me to Denny's, which was like, I've never been to a Denny's. Denny's doesn't exist in the UK. So that was interesting. And I think I had potato fries. Maybe that was it. Potato fries, maybe that was probably all I ate, and maybe a Coke or something else. I think back then there may have been other food in Denny's for vegetarians, but it wasn't easy. Yeah, so I had to cook for myself, or you buy onigiri with umeboshi in it or something. That's vegetarian, but it's not sold as umeboshi. It's not sold as vegetarian onigiri. It's onigiri next to there's umeboshi and there's with fish and blah 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 blah. You go which one's which. Yeah. So a natto maki sushi in the 7-Eleven. You find it. You have to find it. You have to search like a treasure hunt for your food.
ベジタリアンではない家族、友人との食事に困っていませんか？
Of course, obviously, if there's no food for me, they can be embarrassed. That has been a problem. But on the whole, no. My wife isn't a vegetarian. My children are not vegetarians. Some people are very sensitive about people eating meat or fish in front of them. I'm not. It would be very hard for me to work and do my life if I was sensitive like that. So, and I ate meat for 18 years, 16, 17, 18 years. So watching people eat meat and fish doesn't really affect me. It's probably harder for my wife because she has to cook me food that's vegetarian. And because she's Japanese, she's learned, but it was not a natural skill that she had. Friends, yeah, it nearly always comes up one time. If I ever meet people for the first time in any context where it's more than that we're going to have we're going to spend a bit of time together. It's one of the biggest things that comes up, but only once. People now ask you. 30 years ago, people didn't ask you. So you have to say, by the way, I'm a vegetarian. Now, many people ask you, you say you're a vegetarian. They may ask you if you're vegan or not. So they may clarify, and then usually they never ask you again. They never mention it again. They never talk about it again. So that's a bit strange.
ベジタリアンの人の目の前で肉や魚の入った食事をすることを遠慮する人についてどう思いますか？
Let me answer that slightly differently. And this is one of the things about me thinking about food a lot and not eating meat. What we eat is a big part of our identity. The culture, the society, the family we're in. It doesn't define us, but it defines a little bit of us. If we're rich, if we're poor, we eat a bit differently. If we're religious or not religious, we eat a bit differently. Lots of the festivals we have in society, whether they're religious or secular, often have a food element in. And I'll give you an example in the UK. Christmas, usually seen as a Christian festival. It's actually not, it's pre-Christian, but let's say it's a Christian festival. A big part of Christmas isn't presents, isn't Father Christmas, isn't a Christmas tree, it's Christmas dinner. That's a big element. And the same with other holidays and other things. So food is a massive part of everybody's life. And it definitely colors our identity. So if I'm in a group or culture or society where most people eat meat or most people eat fish and I don't, sometimes I think that can be seen as a challenge to that person's identity. And there's a lot of, it's not something I really get involved in, a lot of conversations with vegetarians and vegans being very confrontational if they're eating and being very motivated to persuade other people to not eat meat. I don't take that position. If somebody asks me, I will explain why I don't eat meat. And I will say, I think it's bad for the planet. It's bad for animals. It's bad for humans. It's bad for the planet. But my purpose isn't to persuade. Now, if people don't want to eat meat in front of me, I kind of respect and accept that they are trying to show me respect, maybe. But I think it misses the point. Hiding your meat eating from me doesn't really change anything. I don't really care. I mean, if you have if you kill the animal in front of me and start, maybe that might be a little gross, but I don't really, if you go and kill your chicken outdoors, bring it in and cook it, that doesn't, that's not a problem for me. So hiding your meat eating or your fish eating in front of me, I respect that you're trying to show me some, take some respect, maybe some care, but I think it misses the point. I think it certainly doesn't matter to me. And I would rather you ate meat and talked about why you like to eat meat than hide your meat addiction from me or your meat desire, fish desire from me. It's slightly dishonest. However, if I'm with some Muslim friends, maybe I won't drink alcohol, maybe, if I feel that's going to feel difficult for them. So, maybe, there is some reason for not doing it. But on the whole, especially sort of in, the people I know, I think most people I know would not. Sometimes I'm asked, people say, Steve, should I, do you mind? Do you mind if I eat meat? I'm like, no, of course not. So that's quite nice. If they started smoking, I would say, I don't mind. Now, my wife would go crazy if you started smoking at dinner. I don't mind. I mean, I may not mind it because my wife is unhappy, but I grew up in a house where my parents smoked. I've never smoked, but I don't really care. If it's too smoke, if it's too strong, I might be, but even that, I don't really care. So I'm probably not a typical radical vegetarian, although I am a very radical political thinker.
数ヶ月間ヴィーガンになろうとしたとお聞きしました。なぜヴィーガンになろうと思ったのですか？
I think veganism is really the ideal way to live. I'm probably a little lazy. It takes a little more work. One of the things about being a vegetarian and being a vegan, it takes effort. It takes, you heard me describing about having to try to cook meals when I don't know how to cook, finding restaurants so most people find a restaurant they want to eat in, a vegetarian or vegan, where they can eat. So it's a different sort of situation. So being a vegetarian, and it has taken effort, and it's taken more effort than if I'd have been eating meat and fish. I think to be a vegan, it takes even more effort. Fortunately, it's becoming easier. There's more vegan food available. My ideal situation, I would be a vegan. Sometimes I am a vegan. I don't eat dairy or stuff every day. But it's more work than I'm prepared to do at the moment because I'm lazy. Vegetarian's hard work anyway. And I think my wife would be even more, she would find it even harder if she had to cater for me as a vegan than a vegetarian. So that's not a good excuse. That's in English, a very lame excuse, but it's probably the honest answer.
すべてのベジタリアンにとってヴィーガンは目指すべき理想なのでしょうか？
I think it's an ideal situation, and I think vegetarians should aim for it. Is it the ideal situation for humankind? No, but my real issue with the meat and fish industry isn't that people eat meat and fish, is that we eat far too much. We eat, way too much meat and fish. If everybody reduced it to once a week meat or once a week fish, that would be fantastic. And maybe for a vegetarian, maybe to be a full vegan is perhaps for some people too hard, like me, maybe. So maybe in a vegan, maybe once or twice a week might be the way to go. So I'm very careful of absolutes. Everybody be vegan, vegan's best. Well, everybody be vegetarian, vegetarian. The world's a little bit more complicated than that. But I'm pretty sure that we are overeating meat and fish. And that's more of an issue than more vegetarians becoming vegan. However, I'll one last point. However, the milk and egg industry, particularly because cheese, milk, eggs, which vegans don't eat, so the dairy products and that is, at least as in the West, is terrible. It is a monstrosity. I'm not talking about the farmer with 3 cows and 10 chickens. I'm talking about, and you see it particularly in the US, but it's common in the Europe, the industrialization of milk and eggs and chickens and eggs is awful, and everybody should be a little ashamed of that.
肉料理を作るのと同じ調理器具を使用するのは嫌ですか？洗えば大丈夫ですか？揚げ油は同じだと困りますか？
I'm lucky now. My wife does most of the cooking, but even she is very careful about what mixing. If she serves dishes and there's chopsticks for the food, she has we have guests or somebody or even our children. We don't make sure that they're not mixed between meat and fish and vegetarian food. Of course, when you go to a restaurant, you don't know. I go to an Indian restaurant and it's vegetarian, but I don't know if they use the same spoon for the chicken curry as the vegetarian curry. Maybe they quickly washed it. I mean, if they wash it, that's fine, but it's, you don't know. I'd rather it was clean. First of all, it's clean is important. That's one. And secondly, I would like it not to have meat and fish residue on it. One, you can taste it sometimes. One, you can smell it. And two, I don't really want to, to have even a little bit of meat or fish in my diet.
So, and do you mind to use same frying oil?
I would rather they didn't, but I know it happens. They're using the same frying oil. They're possibly using the same air. It's kind of, where do you stop? Because the fumes of the meat, they don't just stay there. They move to, if you have three frying pans, one with meat, one with fish, and one with vegetarian vegetables, even the steam is going to mix and come down. So I prefer it if they use separate oil, but that's again, who knows? I'm sure I've had food. I've eaten vegetarian food that's been cooked in meat, oil made from, that's cooked and had meat in it, or fish.
So, so it's ideal to separate oils.
Well, I'd rather they did, but I mean, if it's at home, we do. So my wife won't cook a steak and then use the same frying pan and oil for vegetarian, So yeah, personally, yeah, never. I mean, I never cook meat. Well, if I did, I have cooked meat because I've cooked it for my children. So I have cooked it still, but I would never mix, and my wife would never mix. Hopefully, if we go to friends, they wouldn't mix it. Restaurants, I hope not, but
although it is washed cleanly,
if it's washed cleanly, I mean, I don't. If it's washed, then fine. I mean, there may be very minute particles, but there's going to be, if someone's cooking meat in a kitchen, there's going to be meat vapors going into the restaurant. I'm going to be breathing meat or fish a little bit. I can't avoid that. The only way I can avoid it is going to restaurants with no meat or fish, and that choice is not often available. I don't particularly like the smell. If it's a strong smell, she's cooked, certain meats and certain fish is not an attractive smell to me. You've got to remember, it's a dead animal being cooked. It's dead flesh.
So in your home, or your wife separate cooking utensils all?
Yes, I mean, she might wash, and if she uses it, she'll wash it before she uses it for vegetarian. Yeah. We don't have special vegetarian utensils and special meat ones. No.
Oh, wash cleanly. Okay.
Yeah, just dishwasher cleanly. I mean, a dishwasher probably nearly sterilizes it.
肉料理を間違えて食べたことはありますか？もしあれば、その時はどんな気持ちでしたか？
A few things. One, there will sometimes be meat or fish in food that I don't know, like in biscuits and in cake and in stuff. So, you just don't know, it's hidden. It's like some ingredient, you can't taste it. you cannot taste it in the chocolate cookie, but it's probably there. So that's one. And I kind of don't, I don't stop that. Have I eaten food and realized? Yes, I have on many occasions. Probably eaten it sometimes without knowing because it's so small, I don't know. But I've gone to restaurants, and even at home, my wife has made a mistake sometimes, and I've had a bite of something, and I'm like, it's meat or it's chicken. And it makes me feel very uncomfortable. It sometimes makes me want to be sick, to vomit. It actually upsets me greatly. It's like, it's especially when I've asked somebody, is this meat or is this fish? And they say, oh no, it's okay. And you go, and there was once I was in France and I ordered a burger, and it was said vegetarian burger. I bought it, I bit into, I went out, I left, I had it, I bit into it, and it was fake meat, fake vegetarian meat, I think. But it was so close, I couldn't really tell. So I didn't want to eat it. I had to throw it away. Even though the restaurant said it was, and the sign said, and they get it, I was like, this just, and that's probably because I'm not very used to eating meat anymore. A meat eater would know. And I'm like, this tastes very close to meat. It looks like meat. It smells like meat. I don't really want to eat it. And I've literally thrown it away.
So some vegetarians like to eat fake meat, but you don't.
I have done it. I mean, sometimes fake meat doesn't look like meat at all anyway. I mean, they say it's like a, fake meat. I actually prefer it when it doesn't have any reminder that it's meat. So I quite like burgers, and you can get burgers with like meat, vegetarian, but they look like a burger. They're like brown or whatever color meat. What color is meat? Gray, brown? Brown. They look like meat. They're the same shape. If I know it's vegetarian, I will eat it if I've sort of checked. But I prefer a burger that doesn't really look like it's from meat. It looks like it's from a carrot or some vegetables. It's a shape, but it doesn't really look like anything close to a burger. Then I can eat it very relaxed. The problem with fake meat is, I mean, my wife gave me a pizza the other day, and it was from a good shop, and it had like little it was actually a vegan pizza, and it had a few pieces of vegan fake pastrami or bacon or something, I don't know, meat. And I was like, are you sure? And she showed me the box, and we looked at it, and it said, this, but it took me a lot of checking before I was comfortable eating it. It was very nice, but it looked a bit too close to meat for me to feel comfortable.
30年前と比べてイギリスの食事と買い物の状況はどのように変わりましたか？それとも変わっていませんか？
Massive change. As I said, back 30 years ago, supermarkets didn't have any, specific vegetarian food. I was in a supermarket recently, even with lockdown. I haven't been shopping much. And I was just surprised how much vegetarian and vegan special food was. There was vegan cheese has been kicking around for quite a few years. But there were like 25 different vegan cheeses at this supermarket. I'm like, wow, it's not, usually there's like one and it's not very nice. Lots of different, so the supermarkets have obviously seen it. And, restaurants you will be lucky to go to, even if you go to a very burger restaurant, or steak restaurant, they always now have vegetarian food. I mean, pretty much everywhere. And I think one of the other things is, you couldn't buy tofu in England, maybe in a Chinese supermarket in Chinatown somewhere. But now you could buy tofu in nearly everybody in the UK knows tofu. Maybe they don't like it or whatever, but pretty much that word is known by everybody, I think. And a normal supermarket will often have 3 or 4 different kinds of tofu. And I think what's happening is as vegetarian has become more popular, vegan more popular, supermarkets can make and restaurants can make money. It's all about money. There is money now in vegetarianism. Before there was no money, because you give someone a carrot and a potato, there's no money. Now vegetarianism is becoming big money. And I think that is one of the reasons why it's changing. Supermarkets make money out of it, restaurants make money out of it, food chefs can make money out of it. It's as much an economic thing as a social change.
30年前と比べて日本の食事や買い物事情はどのように変わりましたか？
I've been back a few times recently. I'm not completely convinced it's changed much. I think it's changed a little. I think it's a little bit more understood. Maybe there's a little bit more choice. Maybe, but I mean, Japan has always sold tofu. Japan's always sold natto. I mean, for me, they're 2 staple vegetarian foods in Japan that I like, and they're good for you and stuff. Probably Japan has never been big into producing ready meals, ready cooked meals. Because of that, the UK and America, what do they call it? TV dinners has been something that a TV dinner has been something that's been run since the 60s or before, which is basically things that are pre-made that you can put in the microwave or the oven. I think you're seeing ready meals, ready food like that for vegetarians. Japan, from my experience, has never been, it's always been big on selling the ingredients that the person cooks, rather than going and buying a ready cooked meal. So if that's the case, what else can you do for a vegetarian? There's carrots, there's vegetables, there's beans and pulses, there's tofu. The basic ingredients have always been there in Japan in a supermarket or a shop, and there's not really any need. There's no new magic vegetarian ingredients. Mushrooms, shiitake, tofu, vegetables, nori. It's all there. Bread, yeah. In restaurants, I think it's probably a little easier, but not much. And I can't say I've been to lots of restaurants. And if I go to Japan with people, often they take me to places that have good vegetarian food. So it's hard for me to compare. I think the average Japanese restaurant, whatever that is, I could have okonomiyaki. I've gone to okonomiyaki restaurants in Japan 30 years ago, 25 years ago, and the master will make a vegetarian version. He won't put, what do you want in it? Okay, I have, yasai and natto and noodles or whatever. So in some ways, Japan has always had the desire or the ingredients for being a vegetarian. It doesn't produce so much pre-packed dinner. Maybe you could say cup ramen and cup noodles, but restaurants, maybe there's change, but not so much change. In my experience, at least.
最近日本に来たらどこで食事をしますか？日本に来て食事の場所に困っていませんか？
Usually, I'm usually with my wife, and she will find places for me where I can eat vegetarian food. If we go to some places, they'll make it for me, but tempura restaurants, kushiyaki restaurants, okonomiyaki restaurants. They can, places where they make it for you, they can kind of do it. So I do like vegetarian tempura. I do like zaru soba and stuff, but then I cannot have the dashi. I have to have a different one. I do like, I like a lot of basic Japanese food. I like gohan. I like natto. I like tofu. A little yasai, a little tofu, a little gohan, and I'm kind of manzoku. That's enough sometimes.
ベジタリアン向けのレストランはどうやって探していますか？
I mean, again, my wife will often do the work. The good thing about the internet that I didn't have when I was in Japan, you can, you're in Tokyo and you can say, I'm in Nakano. Where can I eat as a vegetarian? And you can find within 30 seconds 5-10 restaurants who serve some or whole or all vegetarian food. I mean, it's easy now. If you're just walking around, Shakey's and some of the American restaurants still, they've always had vegetarian pasta, vegetarian, they don't call it that, but basic pizzas, basic pasta. Some of the American ones have always had that. Whereas maybe some of the normal Japanese ones are less likely. But yeah, the internet and friends, it's easy to find if you have time.
日本食で何が一番好きですか？
I do like, it sounds like I hate Japanese food because I don't eat fish and meat. I love Japanese food. My wife will cook it for me 5 days out of 7. What I like, my favorite Japanese food is yaki, nori, what's it called? Natto nori or not yaki nori natto or whatever. I can't remember the name, but basically nori with some natto in it and then fried, deep fried, and then with a little bit of soy sauce and stuff. I love that, but I love Japanese food. I love tempura. I love gohan. I love natto, which is good for a vegetarian. I love tofu in all its shapes and guises. I like the simple foods in Japan. I've had Japanese, or what's it called? Or the Bukyo Japanese food, the sort of the Buddhist Japanese food you can sometimes get. Shojin Ryori. That's great. I mean, that's probably the best food in the world for me ever. So probably my favorite food is Japanese food, but it without the fish and meat.
日本のレストランにどんなサービスを求めていますか？
I think first and foremost to be transparent. If the dish has meat or fish in it, they should make that very clear. With not just some description in an ingredient. Put an emoji of a cow, a pig. That would make it much easier. But transparency, what is in your food? And I've been in Japanese restaurants and with my wife and with more fluent speakers. And we've asked the waiter or the waitress, does what's the dashi? Is it katsubo? Is it what sort of, and they don't know. They have to go back and ask somebody and come back. So many restaurants in Japan, unless it's just one master talking, they don't always know what is in their food. So that they need to educate their staff. They need to make it very clear for kakusama or what's in the food. Is it meat? Is it fish? And emojis, although we need to learn. I can read the kanji for meat. I can read the kanji for fish. That helps, but it would be so much quicker to say pig, sheep, chicken, blah blah blah. One more point about that. I would like the restaurant and the staff to think more about what they're serving and how that is being communicated to me. For example, I got very tired of explaining to people in Japanese and my wife that I'm a sugisha. I'm going to say it. I'm a vegetarian. I would translate that in Japanese. I don't eat meat. I don't eat fish. And then I would get a meal. So I would say I ordered some pasta, and I would say, is there any meat? No. Is there any fish? No. And they would come with a dish of meat, and it would have bacon in it. And I would say, it's got bacon. And they said, yes. And this is in Japanese. And I said, but I asked you, is there any meat? And they said, there's no meat. I said, it's bacon. Yeah, but it's bacon. It's not meat. And I would like, so to stop that happening, to stop them not thinking, or to make them think, I would say, I don't, I would say in Japanese, I don't eat things that swim. Or yoga naimon or dake taberu. And they would go, huh? What? What do you mean? And then they would ask me, they would say, chicken. I said, no, it swims. They would say oysters. I said, very good swimmers. Brilliant swimmer. I mean, I don't know. And they would say, crab. Kani. Yes, good, very strong swimmers. They would say, pig. Oh, pigs love swimming. So even though I don't really know if oysters swim or crabs swim or whatever, it would make them think more carefully about what is in the food. And if they were not sure, like it's got kaki in it, it's got oysters in it, or it's got some sort of ebi in it, they would say, what about shrimp? And I would say, shrimp swim, I don't eat shrimp. So it would make them ask me a question rather than assuming that bacon is not meat. And it would be nice for them to think a little bit more about why people are vegetarian and to have a little bit more thought. One of the challenges I think I have with Japan, and I could be wrong, and maybe the British, UK as well, is the food chain. You're serving a nice piece of food in your restaurant. How has that got there? And I don't just mean by a lorry or by a truck. I don't just mean the logistics. Was it from, was it dragged from the ocean with a million other fish? Was it in a very bad living conditions for a cow? Was it killed humanely? Was it transported? Did it have a proper life? Because one of the things I am passionate about, the meat and fish industry causes a great deal of unnecessary harm. And I mean for the fish industry as well. The fish and meat industry, because the need to make it cheap, the cost of it to be cheap, the animal welfare, the welfare of nature is not number one. Cost is number one. And I think if we are eating meat or fish that is unnecessarily harmed, and we know that, then that makes us monsters as a species. Killing animals and fish to meat is not an intrinsically bad thing. Killing too much is a bad thing. Killing or managing and killing in a way that is unnecessarily horrible to the animal or the fish is a decision, a choice. And if we choose to eat meat or cook fish that is unnecessarily harmed, I think we are then a monster.
スティーブさん、貴重なお話を聞かせていただき、本当にありがとうございました。実はスティーブさんご自身、これまでどうしてベジタリアンになったのかとか、 ベジタリアンとしてどう考えているのか、どう感じているのかといったことについては、これまで家族の方にも話されたことがなかったとのことです。また、他のベジタリアンの方とも普段そうした会話をすることはないとのことで、他のベジタリアンの方々がどのような考え方をしているのかについてはわからないとのことでした。ベジタリアンの方の考え方は多様ですので、すべてのベジタリアンの方がスティーブさんのような考え方をされているわけではありません。あくまでもこういう考え方のベジタリアンもいるという捉え方をしていただいて、飲食店におけるベジタリアン対応に役立てていただけましたら幸いです。ご視聴いただきありがとうございました。ここからは番外編です。録画を終えて一度学生たちに見せたところ、食の問題を超えてさまざまな質問が出てきたので、それらの質問にも答えていただきました。有機野菜についてどう思いますか？
One of the problems with the meat and fish industry is it's been one of the big problems. It's been industrialized. It's mass. It's a mass. It's not one farmer with one cow. It's one farmer with 10,000 cows or 10 million chickens or something. Or it's not one fisherman with 10 fish. It's one fisherman boat with a million fish. So the scale and the mass production is real. The problem with non-organic food is we have the same problem if we're not careful. It becomes over-industrialized, which can lead to detrimental effects in nature. And we've seen that a lot in the way we've used fertilizers and pesticides for corn, for wheat, for vegetables and things. So that's a real issue. Because and GM food, genetically modified food, that's all about, that's run by one of the biggest companies who runs that. They sell pesticides, so they're not interested in GM food selling. They're interested in the farmer buying pesticides for their vegetables. And pesticides are a terrible thing. They destroy not just insects, but they destroy all sorts of stuff. So even though people tell me GM food is very safe, it's not safe for the planet, and it's the wrong direction. We should be living, mankind should be living a sustainable life. At the minute, we are consuming too much energy, too much food, too much resources. We're consuming something like 2.5 planets of resource, and food is part of that equation. Now, you could say organic food is more, you have to work harder to get, so making food easier and quicker to make is a good thing because you're using less energy. There is an answer for that, but I think organic, small, local is a much more effective way of making the world more sustainable than the wheat fields of Russia supplying all of Europe, or the same in America, and basically making, they are making agricultural deserts through the intensification of farming. So it's not so much organic as much as intensive farming. I really dislike. However, putting chemicals on fields unnecessarily is also something I want to reduce.
ペットを飼うことについてどう思いますか？
It depends a little bit on what animal. I mean, in America, there's that famous thing about the guy keeping all those tigers. I love dogs. We had some dogs. I would like some more dogs. I like cats. I think the right animal and the right thing, I think, is a great thing. And I think it's, dogs have been domesticated for something like 10,000 years. So for a dog to live with a human is as natural now as ever. Maybe 10,000 years ago, it was strange. So I kind of like that. I think that's kind of cool. But I think it depends on the animal and also on the circumstances. I would like some donkeys. are they pets or, you know, I don't have the space. Not to eat the donkeys, not to ride the donkeys. I just kind of like donkeys as an animal. Would that be a pet, or was that just me looking after them? I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a pet or just, but I don't have the space and the land and the time to have donkeys.
動物の命をお金で買うことについてどう思いますか？
Okay, our dog, we had 2 dogs, and both of those were what we call rescue dogs. They were rescue greyhounds. So they were racing greyhounds, and when a greyhound has finished racing, usually they kill them. So they kill them at 3 or 4 years old, and a dog lives to 10, 15 years old. So both our dogs we gave money to the charity as a sort of a gift, but we didn't buy the dogs. We adopted the dogs.
Nice.
And I'm not a big fan of the selling of dogs or cats and the breeding of dogs that are pretty and cute and kawaii, and I think that's pretty horrible. There's too many dogs in the world, and there's too many dogs without homes. So rescuing a dog, if you want a dog, rescue a dog. If you want a cat, rescue a cat. Actually, if you want a donkey, you can probably rescue a donkey. There are dogs and cats looking for good homes for free. They may not be the most beautiful dog, or they may not be the cutest cat, but they'll probably be the best friend you'll have. So yeah, don't buy pets, adopt pets who are needing a rescue home.
イノシシやシカなどの害獣駆除をどう思いますか？
There's harmful and there's hunting. And let me give you an example in the British context. In Britain, although it's stopped, we have wild foxes. Yeah, kitsune. And not for many, you know, maybe for a few hundred years, people have ridden horses with dogs to hunting is to hunt foxes to kill them. And the argument was that the fox is a problem for the farmer. The fox will kill the chickens, the fox will kill the lambs. So we have to kill the foxes. I don't buy that argument. I think that's a false argument. I think that's an entitled argument. It's the same issue they have in Africa with lions and cows. Lions will often kill the farmers' cows because they taste good for a lion, and actually they're probably easy to catch. So what do? Do you kill the lions? In Africa, in some places, yes, you do, but that doesn't seem to be a particularly sensible solution. For thousands of years, we have lived in a relationship with predators. Let's talk about predators: foxes, lions, wolves. And sometimes we've had to kill them and sometimes we've not. But there's been a little bit of a balance, I think. Maybe. I mean, maybe in Europe, we've been very successful of killing wolves. Wolves have pretty much disappeared, except for the very north of Europe. The island of Ireland, do you know, so there's Great Britain, next door there's Ireland. Yes, Ireland, the country. In ancient times, that was called Wolf Island because it was full of wolves. There's no wolves now in Ireland. So maybe we generally destroy predators, and we're doing it in the sea. We kill dolphins some places. We kill seals because we believe they're predators to the things we want to eat. I don't think that's a particularly good thing to do. I think we need to get a balance between predators, natural, and us. Hunting like a vegetarian, so deer, maybe boar, kind of semi-vegetarian. Hunting animals like in America that they do for, you know, bear, deer, moose. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think, I wouldn't participate.
Maybe this question, so my student asked this question because he wanted to know, do you justify to kill harmful animals or not?
I don't think there's such a thing as I mean, if you've got a crazy lion in your village, yeah, maybe. I don't like the idea of thinking, and I think we humans are the most harmful animal.
Yes.
So we kill sharks. We're killing millions of sharks for Chinese shark fin soup. That you could say, because sharks are, every year sharks kill maybe 10 people in the world. We kill over 1 million sharks a year. So the idea that natural animals are harmful, look, if a wolf jumped in my garden to kill my family, I would defend my family. And if I had to kill the wolf, I would kill the wolf. But that situation for 99% of mankind is not real. In places, in some wild places in the world, it is true. Like maybe in some villages in Africa, some places in Alaska, some places in Northern Europe, in Siberia, where you got to protect yourself from an animal that's going to kill you. But
maybe in Japan there is a situation where deer or wild boar destroying plants.
So what? Good. They should do.
Okay.
Why not? What I mean, so you're going to kill it because you're basically killing it to protect something you feel you own. This is my land, my potatoes, my vegetables, therefore I can kill. That's a very strange situation if you think about it. That's saying that you and I own capital. This is what Marx talked about. Capital is land. It's mine. It belongs to me, not to the animals. I dismiss that argument. I think that's a very unsophisticated way of looking at the world. I borrow this land. Okay, I may stop the rabbits and it may stop the animals coming on. Killing them is a solution to a problem that can be solved much better than having to kill something. We know how to stop animals getting on our land. We've known for 20,000 years how to stop animals eating all of our vegetables. 20,000 years we've been farming. We know how to do it without just killing everything. So I think it's an excuse to kill an animal, that's unnecessary.
Unnecessary.
It's very unnecessary.
Although they attack our land.
They don't attack. You're attacking. Who was there? You're attacking their. You're taking their land. Why do you attack your land?
Yes, yeah. Humankind attacking them, reduce their land. You mean?
If you have a problem with a deer, put a big fence up. If you have a problem with a big fence.
Big fence. Oh, I see.
I mean,
or electric.
Well, it doesn't have to be electric, but it's just a big fence. It's easy. It takes effort to do it.
Not kill them.
My wife is planting vegetables and the insects are eating. Now we could spray everything and kill all the insects, or we could learn to manage it properly.
ベーコンや鰹節以外で出されて困ったものは何ですか?
I saw in Japan once or twice people eating sashimi and the fish was still alive. So I saw in the restaurant people eating sashimi.
Sashimi? Yes.
And the fish, mada shindanai sakana. That's wicked. That's horrible.
To see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's unnecessary. Fish have a nervous system. Fish may not be thinking very deeply. Fish feel pain.
Yes.
And you are inflicting pain on an animal that is unnecessary. That makes you, if I inflict pain on a child, Unnecessary. So not just a smack that may be illegal, but if I go, yeah, and I really hurt a child, you would put me in prison, but you're doing it to an animal. Unnecessary. We're not talking about killing them and eating them. The fish can be killed and eaten, and it would be exactly the same, because the restaurant wanted to say, this is very, very fresh. It's still alive. It's still moving. That is unnecessary. That's torture. That makes the person doing that a monster.